Hello and welcome. My name is Sara Harberson. I'm America's College Counselor. Thanks for joining me. This is a special edition of a rapid fire Q&A Facebook Live. If you have questions about the admissions process, no matter what stage of the process you're in, you can ask your question in the comment section below the live feed. So if you are a high school senior trying to make a decision by tomorrow, May 1st, or in the next couple of weeks, you can ask questions about that, or even waitlist activity, which is pretty exciting right now. A lot of high school seniors are finding out that they are being admitted off the waitlist, but then they want to know what happens after that. Those high school freshmen and sophomores and juniors, you're wondering about how your grades for this end of the year are going to be impacting college admissions. You might have questions about SAT and ACT, about how colleges are going to be viewing your spring and summer experiences. So feel free to ask those questions in the comments section below the live feed. We'll also try to add some links in the comments section. For example, this week's blog that I wrote was all about summer activities and what students can do if what they had planned to do got canceled. So my big word in that blog from this week is pivot. It's amazing what students are coming up with. They can make some adjustments and adaptations to their plans, and sometimes what they do this summer is going to be better than what they even imagined from their original idea. So we are streaming live here on both of my Facebook pages, Sara Harberson and Admissions Revolution, and I see we've got our first question, so let's get to it. My daughter is interested in majoring in criminal justice. Could she ask her street law teacher for a letter of recommendation? The class was an elective, one semester. Honor Spanish teacher would be her other. Had that teacher for 2 years. This is a really good question, very similar to what I just got done discussing with my Application Nation class of 2020 group. We talked all about recommendation letters and who to ask. Criminal justice teachers are not considered core teachers, and you want to first focus on those core teachers to ask those teachers for letters of recommendation. Core teachers would be math, science, English, foreign language, and history teachers. So if the student is applying to more selective colleges, then I would say that the criminal justice teacher might not be the best teacher to write one of the 2 required letters that your child might be required to submit. But that could be an additional letter if it's permitted, or Again, it really depends on if your child is applying to those more selective or less selective colleges. But to be safe, I'd probably say a social studies or a history teacher would probably be a better fit than the street law teacher. Next question. What are the top things that juniors who are applying early decisions should do in the next month? Thanks for all that you do. Oh, thanks, Emma. All right, so early decision, if you're not familiar with it, it is a way for students to apply early in their senior year of high school. Usually they submit their application by November 1st, but it's a binding decision. So it means that's their first choice college, because if they get admitted to that early decision school, they are supposed to enroll at that institution the following year. So it's a big decision to make, and not every family is in a position to make it, because a lot of students need to consider other financial aid offers, a lot of other merit scholarship offers, and maybe even other offers of admission. But if the student has identified their first choice and is considering early decision, I would say that they would need to have visited that college and also other colleges to make sure that that is their first choice. The thing is, with most students these days, they are probably applying to an early decision program or an early action program in the fall of senior year. So it's my belief that they should be asking their teachers for recommendation letters right now. That's exactly the message that I gave to the Application Nation group just about an hour ago. So get those recommendation teachers, or the teachers who you're asking for recommendation letters, ask them now before the end of junior year. Get ahead of all the other students who might be asking or want to ask the same teachers. I think it's also important to go into senior year knowing what your classes are and sticking to it and trying to do as well as possible. There are a growing number of colleges and universities that want to see first quarter or first marking period grades for those students who are applying early decision or early action. In terms of testing, we've got to wait and see what is ultimately going to be available for students. But most of the time, even in a normal year, students could probably take the September ACT, the October SAT, even the November SAT scores in previous years usually will get to the colleges in time for them to make a decision. Those scores would arrive after the deadline, but almost always, there are some exceptions, almost always those colleges will accept those November scores. So it is my hope that students will be able to finally begin to take the SATs or ACTs if they want to or need to. Next question. Do you think due to COVID, more people will stay closer to home? Will out-of-state students have a harder time getting into a state school? Okay, so I'm starting to see with the students who are seniors, not only my private clients, but the students in Application Nation class of 2020, they are really considering all of their choices, where in a previous year, if they got into their dream school, that's where they were going. But we've had a lot of students in our Application Nation group really thinking hard about their choice. A lot of them are at least considering going to their local university or a college or university that's closer to home, that is cheaper, and maybe that college offer them a merit scholarship or acceptance to the honors program, and they're thinking, you know what, it might be a good idea to stay closer to home. It's hard to know what's going to ultimately happen, and in fact, they could make a decision right now for May 1st or June 1st, whenever their enrollment deposit is due, and it's possible that they could change their minds. So do I think it's going to be harder for out-of-state students to get into an in-state university moving forward? I think that's going to be something, we're going to start to see, because those students are going to think about pricing, they're going to think about distance, and they're going to be a lot more aware of all those factors, where in previous years, most of the time, students just wanted to go into the best college that they got into. Next question. My daughter is I missed that one. Okay. Will international students be affected in terms of admission and financial aid? It's a strong possibility, yes. So in a normal year, most colleges actually bring in a pretty nice percentage of their freshman class from students who are outside or live outside of the United States. Those students bring a different type of diversity to campus, and a lot of times those students could be full pay students, meaning they don't need financial aid. Because of COVID-19, because of travel restrictions, because of visa issues, it's unclear if those international students are going to be able to return to their colleges in the U.S., but it's also a bit concerning because those students who are currently high school juniors who live abroad are wondering if it's going to be much tougher to get admitted to those American colleges, and I believe that it will. Next question. My daughter is taking AP Chemistry and getting a C-, D+. Would it be better for her to take a withdrawal on her transcript or just take the grade? Okay. So the student is in AP Chemistry, which is a really challenging class. If she got a C-, I'm guessing first semester, it maybe currently has a D+. You want to think about what the average grade will be. Or the final grade will be. You also want to find out, check with your child's college counselor to take a look at an official or unofficial transcript so you get to see what the admissions officers see. In some cases, only the final grade will show up. And if she's able to squeeze out, let's say, a C or a C+, that's better than having a D on her record. But if the D is going to show up, I would say it might be smart to withdraw from that class. Usually it'll list on the transcript that the student withdrew passing if they have a grade in the D range or above. Next question, do you think early decision admit rates will be higher next year if less people apply early decision? I think early decision acceptance rates will be higher, Charlotte. Great question. Here's the thing. All these students who were planning to visit colleges over spring break, over the summertime. They're not able to do that. And so for a student to be able to identify a first choice college their senior year, late in the game, and be able to compare that school to other colleges and be able to visit all these schools, it's going to be very difficult for that student to do that all in the fall of senior year, especially if they're still filling out applications, taking standardized tests, they've got a heavy workload. So I do believe that those early decision applicant pools will be significantly smaller because students just have not been able to visit campuses, and a lot of them are going to be taking standardized tests throughout the fall. And so because of these smaller applicant pools, these colleges are going to have to maximize those numbers even if it's a smaller applicant pool and early decision. So if you were lucky enough to see all of your colleges before COVID-19, or you just have maybe one or two left to see, and one college is a clear winner and you know that's your first choice and your family is supportive of you applying to that early decision binding program, you're probably going to have even more advantages this year than ever before. And generally speaking, if you apply early decision, you usually have a better chance of admission if you are competitive for that college in the first place. Next question, what are your thoughts on colleges charging full price for online learning? Good question. Yeah, most colleges in the country have not announced a plan for the fall. They have not announced a plan for the fall because they still need to bring in their freshman class. Most of these colleges have a May 1st enrollment deposit or May 15th or June 1st. I have a feeling we're going to start to see a lot of plans be unveiled over the coming months, over the summer, but a lot of colleges are afraid to even announce it. I don't know if they can provide a discount in tuition. I think they are going to be hurting significantly because if students are not on campus, they're not getting room and board, they're not getting dining, they're not getting a lot of extra fees that get attached to a student's bill. So we'll have to see. My hope is that they will make some accommodations and provide some discounts if it's online. It's just not clear if they're really going to do that. There are a number of class action lawsuits that have been filed. I think one against Drexel, one against the University of Miami, for students claiming that their tuition should be discounted because of online classes, that it's not the same experience and they're not getting the same opportunities doing virtual learning. Next question, should my daughter take a gap year and reapply to her dream school next year? Great questions, guys. I'm so impressed. So there's a lot of talk about gap year. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but my blog was about the gap year option. It is usually not a popular choice for a lot of high school seniors, but it's definitely an option. I think there are a lot of students considering taking a gap year instead of starting freshman year this year more than ever because they're not sure what the colleges are going to be doing in the fall or beyond that. I would just say that to get approved for a gap year, you really do have to have a plan. It is submitted to the admissions office, and usually the dean of admissions would review it. That was something that I did when I was a dean of admissions. I reviewed those requests for a gap year. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that students would want to do during a gap year, whether it's travel or do a community service project or have a specific job, those opportunities may not be happening because of COVID-19. So it's just something to keep in mind. And one more tip about applying during the gap year to more colleges. Usually a student's best options are going to present themselves during that student's high school, senior year of high school. And so usually a lot is not going to change in terms of admissions decisions a year later. So just keep that in mind. If they were planning to do a gap year and it falls through, their application is going to look very similar to what it looked like when they were a high school senior. Next question, will colleges be asking for senior year first marking period grades since second semester junior year grades were mostly based on virtual learning? Yes, and Darlene, that's a growing trend even before COVID-19. This past fall, I saw a growing number of colleges requiring first quarter or first marking period grades for those students who are applying early decision or early action. Because of this second half of the school year or the last third or quarter of the school year, there are a lot of high schools that are going pass fail. There are a lot of students that are not going to be getting grades. I believe that more colleges will be requiring those first quarter grades for early decision and early action. And if you're in a regular decision applicant pool, the colleges will see a full first semester, fall semester of senior year before they make a decision. So it's a good chance for those students to do really well in their classes, especially if it didn't end well for junior year. Next question, many college admissions representatives, a possible supplemental essay will be to write about how you spent your quarantine time. It sounds like many colleges assume high school students have additional free discretionary, as I heard one director of admissions say, time while virtually learning. That is not the case for my son. He doesn't have any additional free time. For him, it's a typical school day followed by exercise and then homework until 11 or so. I can say that the rigor of the school day hasn't changed. How to handle this? I totally agree. I was just mentioning to the Application Nation group that my son, he's in 4th grade. I feel like his work has tripled since we went to virtual learning. And I think there are a lot of schools and a lot of students in this position. I think it's really important for your son's college counselor to make that clear in the letter of recommendation, because it not only depends on the high school, but it can depend on the student's curriculum and the classes they're taking. So even if your son goes to a high school where the other kids aren't doing a whole lot of work, he might be taking AP classes or IB classes that are actually demanding more of his time. So the counselor of record can actually mention this in the letter of recommendation. But I would say summer is a good time to kind of get started and sink your teeth into something. As I mentioned, my blog from this week was about how students can pivot. If they had this idea in mind, maybe it was a program, maybe it was travel abroad, and that falls through, what can a student do and still have a meaningful experience? And I think the summer experience can be very, very helpful. But here's the thing, listing an activity for the summer before senior year is not required on your application. Now, granted, most students will list something that they do the summer before senior year, but it's not necessary. But I would say if you have a really special opportunity and you have the hours and weeks to back it up, that's something you want to make sure is listed on your activity section in your application. All right, next question. We're going to do that one. Okay. If there are a lot of 2020 class taking a gap year, will this affect the 2021 class admission? So I've gotten a ton of questions like this from families across the country. We did a lot of research when I wrote the blog about the gap year, and we tried to do a sampling of small colleges, large universities, public and private universities. Frankly, most of those colleges were still deciding whether or not or how they were going to be handling the gap year students or the students who were requesting a gap year. Some of the colleges made it clear that they will try to be as accommodating as possible, but I know what it's like to be in the admissions office. I know what it's like to approve those gap year requests as a dean of admissions. And the fact is that if they permit too many high school seniors to take a gap year, that is going to really mess up their enrollment goals for this year. It's going to be very difficult for them to then have to try to fill those spaces with other students, usually students that are coming from the wait list. So a lot of times gap year requests are not required to be submitted to the admissions office until May 1st or June 1st. A lot of times colleges at that point have a pretty good sense of their freshman class. If they grant too many students a gap year, then they're going to have to fill those slots, and that puts a lot of pressure on them. So I think when push comes to shove, these colleges are going to have to put limits and really stick to what has done in the past. And in the past, it's only been a handful of students who want to do a gap year every single year. And as much as students are thinking about doing a gap year, I think the reality is not all of them are going to actually apply for one. Next question, do you think the ACT will be given in June and July? I know the SAT won't. The ACT has some flexible dates in June and July. Do I think they're going to happen? I can't predict because I'm not, an infectious disease doctor, but I just have a feeling that those June and July dates are going to be really, really hard to pull off in the traditional way that the ACT has delivered their exam. The ACT and the College Board, which oversees the SAT, have made public announcements that they are currently working on an online at-home exam, but they will not be ready for the summertime. So my feeling is we've got to be thinking about the August SAT, the new September SAT that was just added. I believe it's September 26th, but if anyone, if it's the wrong date, please feel free to correct me in the comments section. And the September ACT. I think those are going to be the tests. My hope is that actually happen. If not, by the fall, it is my hope that the College Board and the ACT will have an online at-home exam. It's interesting just to point out that NACAC, that's the overarching professional organization that college counselors and admissions officers belong to, they just made an announcement asking colleges and universities, really urging them to reassess the admissions requirements for the class of 2021 because of these cancellations, and also because low-income students may not have access to the same resources as other students who are taking these tests. Next question. Can my daughter put her next semester on hold and attend a local college if they remain virtual, allowing her to return when all students can go on campus? So you'd have to ask, because usually you would have to request a semester off or delay the start or do a gap year. But you have to be careful. If you're, if you want to start spring semester, if you want to start the following fall, you have to be really careful because a lot of these colleges don't want students taking a ton of college classes at other institutions. They don't want a student arriving on campus and already has, has a standing of a transfer applicant. So you would absolutely need to find out if you're requesting a gap year or delaying your start. You'd have to find out how many college credits the students can take before they actually matriculate, officially start at that college of choice. Next question. If your child has to help with family obligations, where can they put that on their common application? I love this question. So that is considered an activity that a student can list on their application. Activities is a very broad term in terms of admissions. It can be a club, it can be a sport, it could be having a part-time job. It can be service work, it could be Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, it could be research. It can also be family responsibilities. So if the student takes care of their younger siblings or they take care of a grandparent or they have to take care of a parent, that is really gonna usually limit their ability to do other things. So you definitely want to mention that as one of your activities on the Common App, Coalition app, or whatever application you're using. Just keep in mind that if you're using the Common application, you only have space to list 10 activities. So choose them wisely, especially for those students that have more than that. If you're using the Coalition application, you only can list 8 activities. And depending on other institutional specific applications, they might have some limitations as well. Next question. I have 2 to 3 colleges in my list of early decision. Do I choose the first choice with a lesser admit rate or the second choice with a higher admit rate? This is a lot of strategy. I'd probably have to know a little bit more, but it's a really good question. So some things to keep in mind. Obviously, because it's early decision, because it's binding, the student has to feel really connected to that college or university. I also always want to make sure that the student is looking at their best test scores, if they're still required, and matching them up to the middle 50% range of scores that admitted students get from that college or university. You can usually find that information by going on the admissions website for that college. You want to make sure that this, even though you get a little bit of an edge in the early decision process, you have to make sure that you are competitive to begin with. So that's really important, and your grades and curriculum really need to match up with that middle range of students that gets admitted. Another thing to keep in mind, if we're talking strategy, if your high school offers Naviance or another online application platform. There are a number of competitors to Naviance right now, but usually on Naviance and these other platforms, you can actually look at scattergrams and see how students from your high school fared at the colleges that are on your list. So you can see how your GPA and test scores match up to applicants from previous years from your high school. And you will start to see some trends because frankly, there are colleges that are more generous to certain high schools, frankly. So you can take a look at those scattergrams and find out that, a highly selected college actually every single year admits a ton of students from your high school under early decision compared to another college that you're considering where it's much harder to get into in general, or just it's very hard for a student from your high school to get admitted. So check those scattergrams out as well. Next question, would you recommend students in the class of 2021 take summer classes for college credit at a state university since most other plans have been canceled? So that's definitely an option. I would say that if you're looking at an online college course you want to take, and I know this sounds crazy, you actually want to stick to your local university, your local community college if possible. Those are usually the most cost-effective choices. So not only is that going to help the family, but admissions officers are not crazy about students taking really expensive college classes as high school students. So that's definitely an option, but really the sky's the limit. Think outside the box, be as creative as you possibly can be when thinking about summer experiences. So it can be a college class, but it can really be anything that you're able to do remotely. Next question. My daughter took her SATs in the fall and did well. Will her scores count less if a school has just changed to test optional due to canceled tests? Great question. So her scores will not count less. All of these colleges that are announcing that they are waiving the SAT or ACT requirements are still going to accept students who send in test scores. And if the student has done incredibly well or really proud of their scores and it matches up well with what that college typically admits, you definitely want to send those scores. So bravo to your daughter who was able to take the test pretty early, I assume pretty early in junior year. If she's happy with her score and it matches up well with the colleges on her list, regardless of whether they're waiving that testing requirement, make sure to send those scores in, because all these colleges that are waiving the testing requirement, or even those official test optional colleges, they still are going to be tracking their SAT and ACT averages. They still need to report those averages for admitted students to every publication and every organization out there. They want those scores to be as high as possible. So if a student has a really high test score before COVID-19, make sure to send it. It can increase that student's chances of admission, especially if they're strong. It can also increase their chances of getting a merit scholarship. Okay, next question. I have a junior. She's an excellent student, and she uses all of her time outside of school training in professional dance. I love dancers. Since she only has time for dance, she has no time for extras like service work. How will this make her look on paper? Okay, so any student that is totally committed to one particular sport, activity, experience, if they're putting that much time into that sport or that art, performing arts, like dance, it should be reflected on the application. So it doesn't matter how many things you list on your activity section, it really matters about the quality and the impact that you've made. So make sure your daughter is listing all the hours that she is putting towards dance, how many weeks per year. If it's, a professional dancer, she's probably dancing, I would say 15, 20, 25 hours a week, and possibly dancing 50 weeks out of the year, maybe even more than that. So it will be reflected in the hours and weeks and show the kind of commitment that she has. But it's nice to have a little bit of variety because you want to show that college that if she doesn't dance when she gets to college, that she's going to contribute in other ways. So summer might be an opportunity to just do something a little bit different, and possibly some of those smaller commitments like clubs at the high school might factor in as well. So it's nice to have a little bit of dimension on that activities list, but those blue chip athletes who are getting recruited or are going to be going to the Olympics, or those incredible professional dancers, usually they have a much shorter activities list, and that does not hurt them in the admissions process. All right, how do I find a list of best colleges for a major my daughter is considering? Is Google my only option? So can I just see that question one more time? Okay, so generally, if a student has an idea about what they want to major in, what they can do is they can start to go on the college's websites and look at the academic majors that are offered to see if that major is available to undergraduate students. It's also important to look at if it's offered as a minor, if it's an interdisciplinary program. So the best way to do it is really to search those colleges, look at the academic programs, and that's really going to help a student who knows what their major is, and frankly, even the students that are undecided. A lot of times when I'm working with a student who feels like they have no idea what they want to major in, they can go on these college websites. I can point out all these really cool majors that they never even thought were offered, and it can really open up their minds. You know, the thing is, there are going to be some more popular majors out there. Just keep in mind those business majors, those computer science majors, even nursing at some institutions can be highly competitive. So you just want to keep that in mind and make sure that your college list is balanced if the major or program that you're applying to is highly competitive. All right, next question. On SAT subject test, what is the score cutoff for sending or not sending a score to a college? Okay, I get this question a lot. We talk about this a lot on the discussion boards of Application Nation. So subject tests, there are only a handful of colleges in the country that still require or highly encourage students to submit subject tests. There are very few at this point, and they are dropping like flies. So MIT, for example, made an announcement several weeks ago to say that they are no longer requiring subject tests as part of the admissions process, and in fact, they will not even accept subject tests. So just keep that in mind. But if your child or you as a student are looking at colleges that still require them, I would say think about how selective they are. They're usually some of the most selective colleges in the country. And for that reason, I generally say at a minimum, if you're going to be sending subject test scores to that college, they should be a 700 or above. And I would say 750 or above is going to be a lot more competitive. It's very hard to take these subject tests, especially in a year like this. And I would say it's very hard to get those kinds of scores. So it's my belief that because so few schools are requiring them, I would put all of your energy right now into studying for the SAT and ACT, hoping that you'll be able to take it late summer or early fall. Next question, my daughter is a 3-sport athlete but may not play in college. How much will that help? I think she's going to have a very full activities list if she is a 3-sport athlete. And it's not like that goes to waste, right? She's put in so much time with those 3 sports, the time commitment, and at this point, you know, most of the athletes are doing these sports all year round. So it's going to be reflected on that activities list. And frankly, colleges know that even if a student is not getting recruited, they have club teams, they have recreational teams for all these sports as well. And so they need students to be a part of all these club and rec leagues or rec teams on their campuses. So those student athletes show a lot of discipline, just like those dancers and those musicians and those artists and those writers. It's just important to sink your teeth into something that you're really passionate about. And if it's sports, that's going to be highly valued just like anything else. Next question. Do we have time for maybe 2 more questions? All right. How can a pass/incomplete in high school not be an impact when other high schools are assigning grades? Our state is convinced that it won't have a negative impact. Okay. So Michelle is asking a question that I think is on the minds of a lot of families. It's hard to know what the trends are for how high schools are handling grades for the end of the school year. I've truly seen a mix. I've seen a lot of high schools go pass-fail. I've seen high schools count grades. I've seen hybrids of that. I've seen high schools who are taking the grades the student got for first semester and then averaging them with an A for every student in every class. So it really depends on the high school. I don't think that the pass-fail option is going to hurt those students. because there are going to be so many other students in the same boat. And I would just say that if your child does really, really well at the end of the school year and their high school has adopted a pass-fail system, I would just encourage them to ask their college counselor if they can get the grades, the actual grades that they got for that end of school year, to be listed in the letter of recommendation or possibly as an addendum on the transcript. And if the counselor's not willing to do that, I would tell the student to do it themselves. It's always best if you can try to submit that kind of information from the counselor of record, but if the counselor of record is not willing to do it, I would definitely do it on your own. All right, I think this is going to be the final question. Is it easier to get into a selective college from a highly competitive high school where you may be lower ranked, or a less selective high school where your class ranking may be higher? This is such a great question. It's so complicated. I feel like I could spend about an hour talking about this. Okay, so let me give you, I'll just try to be as concise as possible. If we were to look at the college admissions landscape 20, 30, 40 years ago, I would tell you that if you went to a highly competitive high school, especially those private high schools or those boarding schools, those students had a much better chance of getting admitted to elite colleges or highly selective colleges and universities. But over the last several decades, these colleges are trying to change that idea or that concept so that families don't think that they have to send their child to an expensive high school to be able to get into colleges. So most of those highly selective colleges have tried to diversify their acceptances. They never want to be pegged as just admitting students from private high schools, from boarding schools, or highly competitive suburban high schools. What you will find is that all these colleges want a diverse student body, diverse in terms of race, socioeconomic background, geography, and even the high schools as well. But if you go to a highly competitive high school, and you are interested in going to a highly selective college, I'm going to tell you that in general, those highly selective colleges still just want the top of the class, but that top of the class is probably a little bit bigger than if you went to your public high school in your hometown. It could be a little bit bigger. However, these colleges have to be super careful not to show preferences at all. It's a tough decision to make, especially if I have any middle school families listening. If your child is considering that private high school, which is going to be a tougher environment, grades will be tougher to get, versus their local public high school or another high school in their community, what is the best environment? It really depends on the student and what they want. Do they want to be a big fish in a small pond? Do they want to get the strongest grades that they can possibly get? Or do they want to be in an environment in high school even where they're surrounded by students from all over the country or all over the world, and that would be kind of a boarding school environment. So it's a tough call to make. I think ultimately though, you take advantage of every opportunity given to you. I'm sitting next to my husband. He went to a boarding school. I went to a public high school. Just take advantage of every opportunity that is given to you. It doesn't really matter at this point where you go to high school and even where you go to college. It's what you make out of that opportunity. So on that note, I think I've got to finish up. It was great to see your questions and some names that keep popping up again and again. I would encourage you that if you are interested in getting my feedback and having me weigh in on a regular basis, a daily basis, sometimes an hourly basis, I encourage you to check out Application Nation. We have several groups. Our Application Nation class of 2020, our seniors, we're going to be announcing some of their final college decisions. So they've gotten into hundreds of colleges, but starting tomorrow, we're going to be announcing where they're going. So check that out on my Instagram. My handle on Instagram is @Sara Harberson. So check it out. And I wish all of those high school freshmen, sophomores, and juniors a great end to the school year. Good luck with the summer, and reach out if you have questions along the way. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.